The transport ship Velthara glided through the vast emptiness between star systems, its sleek hull cutting through the cosmic void like a knife through silk. Captain Kethvar's 4 eyes scanned the navigation display, his scaled fingers drumming against the command console. The Zephyrian had been making this cargo run for 12 cycles now, ferrying supplies between the core worlds and the frontier colonies. "Captain," his second officer, Yilks, called from the sensor station. "We're picking up something unusual on the deep scanners." Kethvar's head swiveled toward the reptilian crew member. "Define unusual, Yilks." "It appears to be a ship, sir, but the design doesn't match anything in our databases. The energy signature is primitive, almost ancient." The captain's interest peaked. In all his years of space travel, discovering an unknown vessel was rare enough to warrant investigation. Most ships in this sector of the galaxy belonged to one of the major species in the Galactic Federation. The towering Korthak with their massive frames and incredible strength, the swift Zephyrians like himself, the wise Melani with their telepathic abilities, or the industrious Vorthan known for their technological prowess. "Bring us closer," Kethvar ordered, "but maintain safe distance. If it's some kind of derelict, we don't want to risk contamination or structural collapse." As the asterisk Velthara approached, the mysterious vessel became clearer on their screens. It was smaller than most interstellar ships, with an oddly angular design that seemed both crude and somehow elegant. Strange markings covered its hull, symbols that looked almost like primitive artwork rather than proper identification codes. "Sir," Yilks's voice carried a note of confusion. "The ship appears to be occupied. I'm reading life signs aboard." "Impossible," Kethvar muttered. "What species could survive in such a primitive vessel? Run a full spectrum analysis." The results that came back made the captain's scales ripple with uncertainty. The life form readings didn't match any known species in the Federation database. Whatever was aboard that ship had never been encountered before. "Captain," another crew member, the young Zephyrian Nexta, spoke up from the communications station. "Should we attempt to make contact?" Kethvar considered this carefully. First contact protocols were strict, but they applied to civilizations, not lone ships drifting in deep space. His cargo schedule was already tight, but the discovery of a new species would be significant enough to warrant the delay. "Open a channel," he decided. "Use standard mathematical sequences first, then basic pictographs." They transmitted for several minutes, sending simple mathematical progressions, basic scientific constants, and peaceful imagery. For a long while, there was no response. Then, suddenly, their communications array crackled to life. The voice that came through was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was deeper than a Zephyrian's vocal range, rougher than the melodic tones of the Melani, yet somehow more nuanced than the rumbling bass of the Korthak. When it spoke, it used words they didn't recognize, but there was something in the cadence, the rhythm, that suggested intelligence and purpose. "Unknown vessel," the voice said in what their translation matrix slowly began to decode. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiant Asterisk. We are conducting a survey mission in this system. Please identify yourselves." Kethvar's crew exchanged glances. Earth, none of them had heard of such a world, and the name Sarah Chen followed no naming convention they recognized from any known species. "This is Captain Kethvar of the cargo vessel Velthara *, he responded slowly, allowing the translation matrix time to work. "We are members of the Galactic Federation. We were surprised to encounter your ship. Your species is unknown to us." There was a pause on the other end. When the voice returned, it carried a note of curiosity mixed with caution. "Galactic Federation," the being called Sarah Chen replied. "We've never heard of such an organization. How many species are members?" The question sent a ripple of shock through the bridge. How could any space-faring civilization be unaware of the Federation? It encompassed thousands of worlds and hundreds of species across this entire spiral arm of the galaxy. "Over 300 species across 47 sectors," Kethvar answered. "Perhaps we should arrange a meeting. Your ship appears small for deep space travel. Do you require assistance?" Another pause, longer this time. When Sarah Chen spoke again, her tone had changed, becoming more formal, more careful. "We appreciate the offer, Captain, but the Defiant is operating within normal parameters. However, we would be interested in a peaceful exchange of information. Perhaps we could arrange a visual conference." Kethvar agreed, and within minutes, their main display showed the interior of the alien vessel. What they saw defied their understanding of space travel engineering. The command center was cramped by Federation standards, with barely enough room for 5 individuals to work comfortably. The technology appeared ancient, with actual physical switches and displays that seemed to rely on primitive light projection rather than neural interface systems. But what truly shocked them was the creature sitting in the command chair. It was bipedal, like several Federation species, but unlike any they had encountered. Its skin was a pale, almost pinkish color, with a distinctive mane of dark fur covering only the top of its head. Its eyes were small compared to Zephyrian standards, and it had only 2 of them, positioned forward on its skull in a configuration that suggested a predatory evolutionary background. "Greetings," Sarah Chen said, and they could see that the sound came from a small opening in the lower part of its face. "I am Commander Chen, representing the human species and the planet Earth." The word human caused another stir on the bridge. Yilks ran it through their xenobiology database but found no matches. This truly was a first contact situation. "Commander Chen," Kethvar replied, trying to maintain diplomatic composure despite his growing fascination. "Forgive our surprise, but your species is completely unknown to us. How long has your people been traveling between the stars?" Sarah Chen's expression shifted slightly, and the translation matrix interpreted it as something called a smile, though its meaning remained unclear. "That depends on how you measure it," she said. "We've been exploring our local star system for about 60 years, and we've had vessels capable of interstellar travel for roughly 30. The Defiant Asterisk is one of our first deep space exploration ships." The numbers hit Kethvar like a physical blow. 30 years? Most Federation species had been traveling between stars for millennia. The Zephyrians alone had been spacefaring for over 2,000 years. How could such a young civilization have developed interstellar capability? "Commander," he said carefully, "I don't wish to seem rude, but your ship appears quite small for extended deep space missions. How many crew members do you carry?" 12, Sarah Chen replied without hesitation. "It's a standard exploration crew for a ship of this class." 12, the Vilthara, was just a cargo hauler, and it carried a crew of 30. Most Federation military vessels carried hundreds or thousands of individuals. How could 12 beings possibly operate an interstellar ship, even one as small as the Defiant Asterisk? "Perhaps," Kethvar suggested, "we could arrange an in-person meeting. I'm sure the Federation Council would be very interested in establishing formal relations with your species." Sarah Chen leaned back in her primitive chair, and her small eyes seemed to study something beyond the visual pickup range. "I'd need to consult with my crew and report back to Earth Command," she said, "but I think a brief meeting could be arranged. However, I should mention that we're currently investigating some unusual readings in this system. There appears to be significant metallic debris scattered across several asteroid fields." Yilks quickly checked their own sensors and confirmed the humans' observation. There was indeed an unusual amount of refined metal debris in the system, far more than would be expected from natural sources. "We hadn't noticed," Kethvar admitted. "Our sensors are focused primarily on navigation and cargo security. What do you make of it?" Sarah Chen's expression hardened slightly. "Based on the composition and distribution pattern, it looks like the remains of several ships, large ones, and the debris field suggests whatever happened here was recent, maybe within the last few months." The implications of this sent a chill through Kethvar's spine. This system was supposed to be empty, with no recorded ship traffic. If multiple vessels had been destroyed here recently, it could mean only one thing: pirates or worse. "Commander Chen," he said urgently, "perhaps we should both leave this system immediately, if there are hostile forces operating here." "Captain," Nexta interrupted from her station, her voice tight with fear. "I'm reading multiple energy signatures approaching our position, large ships moving fast." On the tactical display, 6 massive vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their dark hulls bristling with weapon arrays. Kethvar recognized the design immediately: Krex Raiders, the most feared pirates in this sector of space. Each ship was twice the size of his cargo hauler and armed with enough firepower to reduce both vessels to vapor within minutes. "Unknown vessels," a harsh voice crackled over the communication channel, speaking in the crude dialect of the Krex. "You will surrender your cargo and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate destruction. Kethvar's hands shook as he reached for the surrender beacon. The Kreks were notorious for their brutality, but they sometimes allowed crews to live if they cooperated. Sometimes. Captain, Sarah Chen's voice cut through his despair with startling calm. I suggest you move your ship behind ours and reduce power to minimal levels. Commander, with respect, your ship is barely a quarter the size of one of their vessels. We should surrender and hope they show mercy. On the screen, Sarah Chen stood up from her chair, and for the first time, Kethvar could see her full form. She was smaller than he had expected, barely reaching the height of an average Zephyrian, and seemingly fragile compared to the robust builds of most Federation species. Captain Kethvar, she said, and her voice carried an undertone that made his scales ripple with an emotion he couldn't identify. Trust me. Move your ship to safety and prepare to witness something your Federation has probably never seen before. Without waiting for a response, Sarah Chen turned to her crew. Battle stations, everyone. Looks like we're about to earn our pay. As the asterisk Velthara moved to position itself behind the much smaller human vessel, Kethvar watched in amazement as the asterisk Defiant transformed. Weapon ports that had been invisible moments before opened along its hull, revealing an array of armaments that seemed impossible for a ship of its size. The human vessel, which had appeared primitive and fragile, suddenly radiated an aura of deadly purpose. All Kreks vessels, Sarah Chen's voice broadcast on an open channel, now speaking fluent Kreks dialect. This is Commander Chen of the Earth Defense Force Vessel Asterisk Defiant Asterisk. You are ordered to withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response from the lead Kreks ship was predictable. Harsh laughter followed by a stream of threats and obscenities. Your species is unknown to us, small ship, the Kreks commander sneered. But your foolishness will be remembered briefly before your death. All 6 Kreks vessels opened fire simultaneously, their plasma cannons painting space with deadly energy. Kethvar expected to see the human ship vaporized instantly. Instead, he witnessed something that would haunt his dreams and inspire his stories for the rest of his long life. The asterisk Defiant moved, not with the ponderous grace of Federation vessels or the raw power of Kreks raiders, but with a fluidity and precision that seemed to defy physics itself. The small ship danced between the incoming plasma bursts like a leaf in a hurricane, never where the enemy weapons predicted it would be. And then it struck back. The weapons that emerged from the human ship defied everything Kethvar knew about space combat. Instead of the bright plasma bolts or particle beams common to Federation technology, the Defiant fired what appeared to be solid projectiles at incredible velocity. But these weren't simple kinetic weapons. Each projectile seemed to track its target, adjusting course mid-flight with impossible precision. The first Kreks ship died in seconds. The human projectiles punched through its shields as if they didn't exist, penetrating deep into the hull before detonating with devastating effect. The massive raider vessel broke apart in a chain of secondary explosions that lit up the cosmic darkness. The remaining 5 Kreks ships responded with everything they had, filling space with a web of deadly energy. But the Defiant continued its impossible dance, weaving between attacks that should have been unavoidable. More of the tracking projectiles launched from its weapon ports, each one finding its target with surgical precision. Within 10 minutes, all 6 Kreks raiders were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. In the sudden silence that followed, Kethvar found himself staring at the human ship with a mixture of awe and terror. The asterisk Defiant hung motionless in space, showing no signs of damage despite having faced odds that would have challenged an entire Federation battle group. Captain Kethvar, Sarah Chen's voice came through the communication channel, as calm as if she had just finished a routine training exercise. Are your people injured? Our sensors show no damage to your vessel. We're fine, Kethvar managed to stammer. Commander Chen, what just happened? On the visual display, the human commander settled back into her chair with that strange facial expression she had shown before. We defended ourselves, she said simply, and we protected your ship in the process. I hope this serves as a proper introduction to human capabilities. As the shock began to wear off, Kethvar realized that his discovery of this unknown species had just become the most significant event in recent galactic history. The humans weren't just another primitive civilization taking their first steps into space. They were something else entirely. Something that could turn a dozen crew members and a small ship into a force capable of destroying an entire pirate fleet without taking a single casualty. Something that made even an experienced space captain wonder what other surprises this species might be hiding beneath their deceptively fragile appearance. "Commander Chen," he said finally, "I believe the Federation Council will be very, very interested in meeting your people." 3 days had passed since the encounter with the Krex raiders, and the Vilthara now traveled in formation with the human vessel Defiant toward the nearest Federation outpost. Captain Kethvar had sent his report ahead, but he knew that words alone could never convey the reality of what he had witnessed. The humans had agreed to a formal meeting with Federation representatives, but they had done so with a casualness that unsettled him. Commander Chen spoke of potentially galaxy-changing first contact as if it were a routine diplomatic function, no more significant than filing a shipping manifest. "Captain," Yilks called from his station, "we're receiving a transmission from Outpost Kepler 7. Admiral Vorthak wants to speak with you directly." Kethvar's scales rippled with nervousness. Admiral Vorthak was a Korthak, one of the most senior military officers in this sector. If the Admiral was taking personal interest in this situation, it meant his report had caused significant concern at the highest levels of Federation command. The display screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing form of Admiral Vorthak. Like all Korthak, he stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick armor-like skin and the kind of physical presence that commanded respect from every species in the Federation. His 4 arms gestured as he spoke, each movement deliberate and powerful. "Captain Kethvar," the Admiral's deep voice rumbled through the communication system. "Your report makes some extraordinary claims about this unknown species. 6 Krex raiders destroyed by a single small vessel with no damage to the attackers." "Yes, sir," Kethvar replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I recorded everything. The humans' combat capabilities exceed anything I've encountered in my career." Admiral Vorthak's massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that indicated deep thought among his people. "And you say their ship appears primitive, outdated technology?" "By our standards, yes, sir, but I'm beginning to think we may have misunderstood what we were seeing. Their weapons technology is completely different from ours, more precise." "Captain," another voice interrupted, and the screen split to show a second figure. This one was Melani, with the flowing, ethereal appearance characteristic of their telepathic species. "This is Counselor Yethan. I've been reviewing your sensor logs. These humans intrigue us greatly." The Melani were known throughout the Federation for their wisdom and their ability to sense the true nature of other beings through psychic contact. If Counselor Yethan was personally involved, this situation had attracted attention at the very highest levels of government. "Counselor," Kethvar said with appropriate respect, "the humans have agreed to meet with Federation representatives. Commander Chen seems genuinely interested in peaceful relations." "Yes," Yethan replied, her musical voice carrying undertones that suggested complex emotions. "But there is something else in your report that concerns us. You mentioned that this Commander Chen spoke fluent Krex dialect when addressing the raiders. How does a newly space-faring species learn the language of pirates they've never encountered?" The question hit Kethvar like a cold shock. In all the excitement and fear of the battle, he hadn't considered the implications of that detail. How had the human commander known how to speak Krex? And not just basic communication, but fluent, aggressive dialect that showed understanding of their cultural nuances. I don't know, Counselor. I assumed they had translation technology similar to ours." "Translation matrices work on known languages," Admiral Vorthak interjected. "They require extensive databases and cultural context. No species develops translation capabilities for languages they've never encountered." The communication channel crackled briefly before another voice joined the conversation. This one belonged to Zorthek, a Vorthan scientist whose mechanical augmentations gleamed even through the low-resolution transmission. "Captain Kethvar," Zorthek's electronically modulated voice buzzed with excitement, "we need detailed scans of their vessel's technology. The weapon systems you described shouldn't be possible with their apparent technological base. Kinetic projectiles with independent guidance systems require computational power beyond what their ship size should allow." "Dr. Zorthek," Kethvar replied carefully. I'm not sure the humans would appreciate us scanning their ship without permission. They've been cooperative, but they're also clearly capable of defending themselves. Which brings us to another concern, Counselor Yethan said. Your report mentions that their ship transformed during the battle, revealing weapon ports that were previously invisible. Shape-shifting technology of that sophistication is beyond even our most advanced engineering capabilities. As if summoned by their conversation, the communication board chimed with an incoming transmission from the defiant Asterisk. Sarah Chen's image appeared on a corner of the display, her strange, two-eyed face showing what the translation matrix identified as concern. Captain Kethvar, she said, our sensors are detecting multiple large vessels approaching this system. Are you expecting company? Admiral Vorthak leaned forward, his massive form filling most of the screen. Commander Chen, this is Admiral Vorthak of the Federation Defense Force. I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. The approaching vessels are Federation ships under my command, coming to escort you to our meeting location. Sarah Chen's expression shifted slightly, and Kethvar was learning to read the subtle changes in human facial features. This particular change suggested wariness, perhaps suspicion. How many ships, Admiral? A full battle group, Vorthak replied without hesitation. 12 vessels, including my flagship Dominance Asterisk. I assure you, this is purely for diplomatic protocol and your protection. There was a pause before Sarah Chen responded, and when she did, her tone had changed. The casual friendliness was gone, replaced by something more professional and careful. Admiral, I appreciate the gesture, but a full battle group seems excessive for a diplomatic meeting. The defiant Asterisk is quite capable of protecting itself, as Captain Kethvar can attest. Indeed, Admiral Vorthak said, and there was something in his rumbling voice that made Kethvar's scales prickle. Your combat performance against the Kreks was quite impressive. Tell me, Commander, how did a species with only 30 years of space travel develop such advanced warfare capabilities? The question hung in space between the two ships like a challenge. Sarah Chen's small eyes seemed to focus on something beyond the camera pickup, and when she spoke again, her words were measured and precise. Admiral, the same way any species develops necessary capabilities, through experience, innovation, and the will to survive. Perhaps we can discuss this further during our formal meeting. Before Admiral Vorthak could respond, another voice cut into the communication channel. This one belonged to Lieutenant Reese, one of Sarah Chen's crew members. Commander, the voice said urgently, long-range sensors are picking up additional contacts. Looks like more ships are jumping into the outer system. Sarah Chen's expression hardened immediately. How many and what configuration? At least 20 vessels, ma'am. Mixed classes, but they're maintaining a perimeter formation around the system. It's looking like an encirclement pattern. The bridge of the Asterisk Velthara fell silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Vorthak's forearms moved in what Kethvar recognized as defensive gestures, and even Counselor Yethan's usually serene expression showed signs of concern. Admiral, Sarah Chen said, her voice now carrying an edge that reminded Kethvar uncomfortably of the tone she had used before destroying the Kreks raiders. Would you care to explain why you've surrounded this system with over 30 warships for what you described as a diplomatic meeting? Commander Chen, Admiral Vorthak began, I assure you that these are merely precautionary. Admiral, the single word cut through his explanation like a blade. I've been a military officer for 15 years. I know the difference between a diplomatic escort and a battle formation. Right now, your ships are positioned to prevent any vessel from leaving this system. That's not protection. That's containment. The tension in the communication channel was palpable. Kethvar found himself caught between admiration for the human commander's tactical awareness and fear of what might happen next. If the humans reacted to this perceived threat the way they had responded to the Kreks' attack. Commander, Counselor Yethan's melodic voice attempted to restore calm to the situation. Please understand that your capabilities have caused significant concern among our military leadership. A single small vessel destroying 6 Kreks raiders without taking damage is unprecedented. We simply wish to ensure that any meeting proceeds safely for all involved. Sarah Chen's laugh was short and held no humor. Counselor, if we intended harm to your people, do you really think surrounding us with warships would stop us? We destroyed 6 heavily armed pirates with 12 crew members. What do you think we could do if we actually considered you a threat? The question sent a chill through everyone listening. Admiral Vorthak's armor-like skin darkened with anger, but before he could respond, another human voice spoke from the defiant asterisk. Commander, we're being actively scanned. Multiple sensor sweeps from different vectors. They're trying to penetrate our defensive screens. Very well, Sarah Chen said, and her calm tone was somehow more frightening than if she had shouted. Admiral Vorthak, Counselor Yethan, you've just made a serious error in judgment. The asterisk defiant began to move, and once again Kethvar witnessed the impossible grace with which the human ship maneuvered. But this time was different. This time, the small vessel didn't simply dodge and weave. It accelerated directly toward the approaching Federation battle group at a speed that should have torn apart any ship of its apparent construction. All Federation vessels, Sarah Chen's voice broadcast on an open channel, you have 3 minutes to withdraw to a minimum distance of 50,000 kilometers. Any ship that maintains an aggressive posture after that time will be considered hostile. Admiral Vorthak's 4 fists clenched simultaneously. Commander Chen, you are threatening Federation military vessels. This is an act of war. No, Admiral, Sarah Chen replied, her voice carrying the cold precision of absolute certainty. This is a demonstration of why you shouldn't have tried to threaten us in the first place. What happened next would be studied in Federation military academies for generations to come. The defiant asterisk didn't simply attack the surrounding fleet, it dissected it. The small human ship moved through the formation of 30-plus Federation vessels like a surgeon's blade, striking with pinpoint precision at specific systems on each ship. Weapons arrays went dark, engine assemblies shut down, communication arrays sparked and failed. Within minutes, the entire Federation battle group was effectively neutered, floating helpless in space without a single crew member killed or even seriously injured. Impressive restraint, Admiral Vorthak admitted grimly as his flagship dominance drifted powerless. You could have destroyed us all. Yes, Sarah Chen agreed simply. We could have. But unlike some species we've recently encountered, humans don't solve diplomatic problems by pointing weapons at potential allies. The communication channel fell silent except for the subtle background noise of ship systems. Finally, Counselor Yethan spoke, her musical voice carrying a note of something that might have been awe. Commander Chen, she said slowly, what manner of species are you? Your ship is small, your crew is minimal, your technology appears primitive, yet you've just demonstrated capabilities that exceed our most advanced military systems. Sarah Chen's strange facial expression shifted again, and this time Kethvar thought he was beginning to understand what humans called a smile. Counselor, she said, we're exactly what we appear to be. Humans from a small planet called Earth, taking our first steps into a galaxy we're only beginning to understand. The question isn't what manner of species we are. She paused, and when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of absolute confidence. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for us. The Federation Council chamber on Sanctuary Prime had never hosted a more unusual gathering. Representatives from over 50 species filled the massive circular amphitheater, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. At the center of it all sat a small delegation that seemed almost insignificant by comparison. 4 humans in simple uniforms, looking remarkably calm for beings whose very presence had thrown the galaxy's most powerful alliance into chaos. Commander Sarah Chen sat at the primary witness table, flanked by her 3 senior officers from the defiant asterisk. To her right was Lieutenant Commander James Park, her tactical officer, whose quiet demeanor masked the brilliant strategic mind that had helped design the engagement protocols used against the Federation fleet. On her left sat Dr. Alina Vasquez, the ship's science officer, whose understanding of alien technology had proven crucial in adapting human systems to galactic standards. Behind them stood Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, the engineering specialist who had somehow managed to keep their ship running at peak efficiency despite being outnumbered 30-1 in the recent engagement. High Chancellor Mordek, an ancient Korthak whose massive frame dominated the central podium, called the session to order. His 4 arms gestured with the formal precision required by centuries of diplomatic protocol. This emergency session of the Federation Council has been convened to address first contact with the species known as humans. His rumbling voice echoed through the chamber. "Before we begin formal questioning, I want to ensure that all representatives understand the unprecedented nature of this situation." He gestured toward a massive holographic display that showed the aftermath of the Asterisk Defiance encounter with Admiral Vorthak's battle group. 31 Federation warships floated in space, their weapons systems dark, their engines offline, their crews unharmed but completely helpless. "In 17 minutes, Chancellor Mordek continued, a single vessel with 12 crew members neutralized our sector's primary battle group without causing a single casualty. They demonstrated technological capabilities that our finest scientists claim should be impossible tactical awareness that surpasses our most experienced admirals, and restraint that prevented what could have become the most devastating military disaster in Federation history." A ripple of movement passed through the assembled representatives as the weight of those words settled over the chamber. Councillor Yethan rose from her seat in the Melani section, her flowing robes catching the chamber's ambient light. "Commander Chen," she said, her telepathic abilities allowing her to project both her voice and her emotional undertones throughout the chamber, "my people have attempted to establish psychic contact with your delegation. We find ourselves blocked, not aggressively but completely. It's as if your minds exist behind barriers we cannot penetrate. How is this possible?" Sarah Chen stood to address the council, her small stature making her appear almost childlike among the towering alien representatives. But when she spoke, her voice carried the absolute confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. "Councillor Yethan," she began, "humans evolved on a world where mental privacy was essential for survival. We've developed natural psychological defenses against intrusion. Additionally, our people have specific training protocols that enhance these natural barriers when dealing with telepathic species." "Training protocols?" The question came from Dr. Zorthek, whose mechanical augmentations clicked and whirred as he processed this information. "You're suggesting that your species has developed systematic defenses against psychic contact before ever encountering telepathic beings?" "Correct," Dr. Vasquez answered, rising to stand beside her commander. "Human psychology includes natural resistance to external mental influence. We enhanced these abilities when our deep space exploration programs indicated we might encounter telepathic species." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. The idea of a species developing defenses against abilities they had never encountered suggested a level of strategic thinking that impressed even the most paranoid military minds present. Admiral Vorthak, attending despite his recent humiliation, stood with difficulty. His flagship was still undergoing repairs from the Asterisk Defiance Asterisk surgical strike on its systems. "Commander Chen," he said, his voice carrying the grudging respect of a professional soldier, "your tactical performance was exceptional. But I must ask, how did you know exactly which systems to target on our ships? Your strikes disabled our vessels without affecting life support, artificial gravity, or emergency systems. That level of precision suggests detailed knowledge of Federation ship design." Sarah Chen exchanged a brief glance with Lieutenant Commander Park before responding. "Admiral, when you're vastly outnumbered, precision becomes more important than power. We studied your vessel configurations during the approach and identified critical systems that would neutralize offensive capabilities without endangering crew members." "In 17 minutes, Admiral Vorthak's tone suggested deep skepticism. "Commander, some of our ships were designs you had never encountered before, yet you targeted their systems with surgical precision." "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Park spoke for the first time, his voice calm and professional, "human tactical doctrine emphasizes adaptability and rapid analysis. When facing superior numbers, we focus on disabling rather than destroying. It's both more efficient and more ethical." Chancellor Mordek raised one of his massive hands, calling for order as representatives began speaking among themselves. "Commander Chen," he said, "let us address the question that concerns us most. Your species has been space-faring for 30 years. Most Federation members required centuries or millennia to develop the capabilities you've demonstrated. How do you explain this accelerated development?" The chamber fell silent, every representative leaning forward to hear the answer. Sarah Chen looked around the amphitheater, her small eyes taking in the diverse array of beings that represented the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Chancellor, she said slowly, I think there may be a fundamental misunderstanding about human development. We didn't start with advanced technology and work our way up to space travel. We started with something else entirely. Which was, Counselor Yethan prompted. War. The single word hit the chamber like a physical force. Representatives from peaceful species recoiled visibly, while military officers leaned forward with sudden, intense interest. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward to explain. Human history is characterized by almost constant conflict. We've been developing military technology, tactical doctrine, and strategic thinking for our entire recorded history. When we finally achieved spaceflight, we simply applied principles we'd been refining for thousands of years. You're saying, Dr. Zorthek's mechanical voice buzzed with fascination, that your species developed advanced warfare capabilities before achieving interstellar travel. That's exactly what we're saying, Chief Thompson spoke for the first time, his gruff voice carrying the practical tone of an experienced engineer. Every system on our ships was designed with combat in mind. Our engines, our sensors, our weapons, our defenses. We don't build exploration vessels and then add weapons. We build weapons platforms and add exploration capabilities. The implications of this revelation sent shock waves through the assembled representatives. Most Federation species had developed space travel for exploration, trade, or scientific advancement. The concept of a species that had weaponized space flight from the beginning was both fascinating and terrifying. A new voice spoke from the section reserved for younger Federation members. Kexara, a Zephyrian barely past her first molting, stood with the eager curiosity of youth. Commander Chen, she said, if your people are so focused on warfare, why did you show restraint with our battle group? You could have destroyed every ship, but instead you disabled them without causing casualties. Sarah Chen's expression shifted into what the humans called a smile, but this one was different from the ones Kethvar had observed. This smile seemed warmer, more genuine. Young Kexara, she said, that's the most important question anyone has asked today. Yes, humans are exceptionally good at warfare. We've had to be to survive on our world and in our early space exploration. But being good at war doesn't mean we enjoy it or seek it unnecessarily. She paused, looking around the chamber again before continuing. The greatest military victory is the one that achieves your objectives without unnecessary destruction. Admiral Vorthak's fleet posed a threat to our ship and crew. We neutralized that threat with minimal force and no casualties. That's not restraint born from weakness. That's restraint born from strength and wisdom earned through experience. Lieutenant Commander Park stepped forward to add, every human military officer is taught that the purpose of superior firepower is to avoid having to use it. When you can destroy your enemy easily, you have the luxury of choosing not to. Chancellor Mordek's massive head nodded slowly, a gesture of understanding that transcended species barriers. Commander Chen, he said, you speak of warfare as if it's a natural condition for your species. Most Federation members achieved space travel by overcoming their violent tendencies. Are you saying humans have not? Chancellor, Dr. Vasquez answered, we've learned to channel our competitive instincts constructively. We still compete, we still struggle, we still fight when necessary. But we've also learned when fighting serves a purpose and when it doesn't. And right now, Counselor Yethan asked softly. Sarah Chen stood straight, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of beings many times her size. Right now, we're explorers meeting new civilizations for the first time. We came to this system conducting a peaceful survey mission. We defended ourselves when attacked by pirates, and we defended ourselves when surrounded by your warships. But we're here to learn, to trade, to explore, and to make friends. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute sincerity. The question isn't whether humans are peaceful or warlike. The question is whether the galaxy can accept a species that's exceptionally good at both. In the silence that followed, a small voice spoke from the observation gallery. It was barely more than a whisper, but in the perfect acoustics of the chamber, every word was clearly audible. Is that a human? The question came from Nixtal, a young Zephyrian cub who had accompanied his guardian to observe the historic proceedings. His wide eyes stared down at the human delegation with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Yes, little one, his guardian whispered back, trying to quiet the cub. Those are humans. But Nixtal's next question sent a chill through every representative in the chamber. They look so small and weak. How can they be so scary? It was Commander Chen who answered, her voice carrying clearly to the observation gallery. Young Nixtal, she said, looking up at the cub with gentle eyes, appearance can be deceiving. The most dangerous predators on our world aren't the largest or strongest. They're the ones that are smart enough to hunt in packs, patient enough to wait for the right moment, and skilled enough to strike without warning. She smiled again, and this time there was something in that expression that reminded every being present of their own world's apex predators. But predators also protect their own territory and their pack members. As long as you're not a threat to what we value, you have nothing to fear from humans. The chamber remained silent as representatives contemplated the implications of first contact with a species that described itself in terms of predatory behavior, while demonstrating both devastating capability and remarkable restraint. Finally, Chancellor Mordick spoke. Commander Chen, on behalf of the Federation Council, I formally extend an invitation for Earth to establish diplomatic relations with our alliance. However, given the unique nature of your species, this will require extensive discussion and careful protocols. We understand, Chancellor, Sarah Chen replied. But I should warn you, we're not the only exploration ship out here. Humanity has been expanding into space for 30 years. By now, there are human vessels operating throughout this entire sector of the galaxy. The revelation hit the chamber like another shock wave. If one small human ship could neutralize an entire battle group, what could dozens of them do? How many ships? Admiral Vorthak asked quietly. Sarah Chen's smile returned, and this time it carried the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. Admiral, she said, that depends on how well these diplomatic discussions go. As representatives began talking urgently among themselves, young Nixtal's voice carried through the chamber one more time. Guardian, the cub whispered, I think we found the hunters. Captain Kethvar stood on the observation deck of Sanctuary Prime's orbital station, watching the parade of human vessels arriving in the system. What had begun as a single exploration ship had become a fleet of 12 vessels, each one as deceptively modest as the Asterisk Defiant, and each one carrying technologies that challenged everything the Federation thought it knew about space travel. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency council session, and the galaxy had not been the same. Word of humanity's capabilities had spread through every sector, causing reactions that ranged from fascination to terror. Some species clamored to establish immediate trade relations, while others called for preemptive military action before the humans could expand further. Remarkable, Dr. Zorthek commented, his mechanical augmentations whirring as he processed the sensor data flowing across his portable display. Each of those vessels shows a completely different technological signature. It's as if they represent different approaches to the same basic design principles. Kethvar nodded, though his attention was focused on something else entirely. In the 3 weeks since first contact, he had spent considerable time with various human crew members, and what he had learned troubled him more than the display of military might. Doctor, he said slowly, I've been reviewing the translation logs from our conversations with the humans. There are certain words and concepts that their translation matrix consistently fails to process correctly. Such as, Zorthek's optical sensors focused on the Zephyrian captain. They keep referring to something called total war. When our systems attempt to translate the concept, they return error codes. It's as if the idea is so foreign to Federation thinking that our languages lack equivalent terms. Before Zorthek could respond, their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Counselor Yethan. The Melani's usually serene expression showed signs of deep concern. Captain Kethvar, she said, her telepathic abilities projecting an undertone of unease, I've just finished my 3rd attempt at establishing psychic contact with the human delegation. The results are disturbing. In what way? Kethvar asked. It's not simply that their minds are shielded, Yethan explained. It's the nature of what lies behind those shields. I caught glimpses, fragments of thought and memory that suggest psychological structures unlike anything in our experience. She paused, seeming to struggle with how to explain what she had sensed. Captain, I believe these humans think differently at a fundamental level. Their mental processes seem designed for situations that would paralyze most Federation species with fear or moral confusion. Their discussion was interrupted by an announcement over the station's communication system. Commander Chen had requested a private meeting with senior Federation officials to discuss what she termed clarification of human capabilities and intentions. An hour later, Kethvar found himself in a secure conference room alongside Admiral Vorthek, Counselor Yethan, Dr. Zorthek, and Chancellor Mordek. Commander Chen entered alone, carrying a small data pad and wearing the same calm expression she had maintained throughout every interaction. "Honored representatives," she began without preamble, "my government has instructed me to provide you with additional information about human capabilities and history. We believe transparency will serve both our species better than continued speculation." She activated her data pad, and the room's main display showed a star map highlighting dozens of solar systems. "This represents current human presence in this galactic sector," she said. "We have established settlements, research stations, or military outposts in 47 systems. Our exploration fleets have surveyed over 300 systems, and our long-range scouts have identified potential colony sites in several hundred more." The scale of human expansion sent a shock through the assembled officials. In 30 years, they had achieved a spread that most Federation species required centuries to accomplish. "Commander," Chancellor Mordek rumbled, his massive form leaning forward, "this level of expansion suggests a colonization effort far beyond what you initially described. Are humans conducting a systematic conquest of this region?" "No, Chancellor," Chen replied calmly. "We're conducting a systematic survey and establishment of strategic positions. There's a significant difference." "Enlighten us," Admiral Vorthek said grimly. Commander Chen touched another control, and the display shifted to show a detailed breakdown of human activities. Settlement patterns, resource extraction operations, defensive installations, and what appeared to be extensive sensor networks throughout the region. "Admiral, when humans enter a new region, we follow protocols developed over centuries of exploration on our own world. We establish supply lines, communication networks, defensive positions, and fallback points before we commit to major settlements. What you're seeing isn't conquest. It's preparation." "Preparation for what?" Dr. Zorthek asked. "For whatever we encounter," Chen answered simply. "Our species has learned that survival depends on being ready for any possibility." Counselor Yethan leaned forward, her telepathic senses focused intently on the human commander. "Commander Chen," she said carefully, "when you speak of preparation and survival, your emotional resonance suggests experiences that go beyond normal exploration challenges. What has your species encountered that requires such extensive defensive thinking?" For the first time since Kethvar had known her, Commander Chen's calm facade showed a crack. Something flickered across her face that the translation matrix identified as pain mixed with determination. "Counselor," she said quietly, "let me tell you about the Voidborn." The name meant nothing to any of the Federation representatives, but the way Chen said it sent a chill through the room. 12 years ago," she continued, "our deep space exploration encountered a species that exists solely to consume other life forms. Not for resources, not for territory, not for any reason that civilized beings can understand. They exist to feed on the life force of other species." She touched her data pad again, and the display showed images that made even hardened military officers recoil. Twisted, organic ships that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Worlds stripped bare of every living thing. Space hulks that had once been proud vessels, now floating graveyards. "The Voidborn nearly destroyed us," Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of terrible memory. "They consumed 14 human colonies before we learned how to fight them effectively. They're still out there, somewhere beyond our current borders, and we know they'll return eventually." "This is why you build every ship as a weapons platform," Admiral Vorthak said, understanding beginning to dawn in his voice. "This is why we prepare for any possibility," Chen confirmed. "The Federation represents hundreds of species across thousands of worlds. To us, that's not just a political alliance. That's the largest collection of potential prey the Voidborn have ever encountered." The silence in the room was profound as the implications settled over the assembled representatives. They had been worried about human military capabilities, never realizing that those capabilities had been developed to fight an enemy that threatened all life in the galaxy. Commander, Chancellor Mordex said slowly, why didn't you mention this threat initially? Because, Chancellor, we've learned that most species can't handle the psychological reality of the Voidborn until they've encountered them directly. Your Federation has enjoyed peace and prosperity for centuries. The concept of an enemy that exists solely to consume life is outside your experience. Dr. Zorthek's mechanical systems buzzed with rapid calculations. Commander, he said, the defensive installations you've established throughout this sector. You're not just preparing for exploration or expansion, you're building a barrier. Correct, Chen acknowledged. Human space serves as a buffer zone between the Voidborn's last known position and Federation territory. Every ship, every outpost, every settlement is positioned to detect and delay any Voidborn incursion long enough for evacuation protocols to be implemented. Counselor Yethan's ethereal voice carried a note of dawning horror. You're not just soldiers, she whispered. You're guardians. You've positioned yourselves between an existential threat and the rest of the galaxy. Counselor, Commander Chen said, and for the first time her calm mask completely dropped, revealing the exhausted determination of someone who had carried an impossible burden for too long. My species has been alone in this fight for 12 years. We've lost millions of people, sacrificed entire colonies, and turned our civilization into a military machine because someone had to stand watch. She straightened, and the mask of professional composure returned. But we don't want to be alone anymore. The Federation represents the largest concentration of intelligent life we've ever encountered. If you'll accept us as allies rather than treating us as a threat, we can share our knowledge and our defensive strategies. Together, we might actually have a chance when the Voidborn return. Admiral Vorthak stood slowly, his massive frame moving with unusual deliberation. Commander Chen, he said formally, on behalf of the Federation Defense Force, I apologize for our initial hostile reception. We didn't understand what we were dealing with. Admiral, Chen replied, you were protecting your people from an unknown threat. That's exactly what you should have done. The fact that you showed restraint and allowed diplomacy to proceed proves that the Federation is worth protecting. Chancellor Mordex, four arms moved in a complex gesture of respect and determination. Commander, he rumbled, what does humanity need from the Federation to continue this guardianship? Resources, personnel, and above all, time, Chen answered immediately. We need to expand our defensive network, develop new technologies, and prepare the galaxy for a threat that most species can't even imagine. But most importantly, we need allies who understand that sometimes peace can only be preserved through strength. As the meeting concluded, and plans began to form for humanity's integration into the Federation, Captain Kethvar found himself thinking about young Nixtal's innocent question in the council chamber. How can they be so scary? Now he knew the answer. Humans weren't scary because they were monsters. They were scary because they were willing to become monsters to protect everyone else from the real monsters that lurked in the darkness between stars. They had witnessed the hunter under the surface, and it had been protecting them all along. Outside the conference room windows, the human fleet hung in space like a promise and a warning. Each vessel represented years of sacrifice, loss, and determination. Each crew member carried the weight of knowledge that most species couldn't bear. And somewhere in the vast darkness beyond charted space, the Voidborn waited, patient and hungry, for the barriers that protected galactic civilization to weaken. But now, for the first time in 12 years, humanity wouldn't be standing watch alone. 6 months had transformed the galaxy in ways that no one could have predicted. Captain Kethvar stood on the bridge of his newly retrofitted cargo vessel, now equipped with human-designed early warning sensors and defensive systems. The Velthara had become part of the expanding detection network that stretched across dozens of star systems, a web of vigilance that grew stronger with each passing day. The integration of humanity into the Federation had proceeded with remarkable speed, driven by necessity rather than political convenience. When the full scope of the Voidborn threat became clear, even the most hesitant species had recognized that their peaceful isolation was an illusion that could be shattered at any moment. Captain, Yilks called from his sensor station, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Defiant Asterisk. Commander Chen requests immediate consultation. Kethvar felt his scales tighten with familiar tension. In the months since humanity's revelation about the Voidborn, priority transmissions had become synonymous with bad news. "Put her through," he ordered. Commander Chen's image appeared on the main display, but she was no longer alone. Behind her stood Admiral Vorthak, whose massive Korthak frame had become a common sight on human vessels as Federation and human military doctrine merged into something new and terrifying in its efficiency. "Captain Kethvar," Chen began without preamble, "we need you to divert to the Kepler-9 system immediately. Our deep space monitors have detected anomalous energy readings consistent with void-borne scout probes." The words hit Kethvar like a physical blow. For months, they had been preparing for this moment, but hearing it announced made the threat suddenly, terrifyingly real. "How long do we have?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "Unknown," Admiral Vorthak's rumbling voice answered. "Human protocols suggest that scout probes typically precede main force incursions by weeks or months, but we've never had confirmed void-borne activity this close to Federation space before." As the asterisk Velthara changed course toward the Kepler-9 system, Kethvar reflected on how much had changed since that first encounter with the small human exploration vessel. The Federation Defense Force had been completely restructured, incorporating human tactical doctrine and technology. Every ship now carried crews trained in what humans grimly called total war protocols. Every system had evacuation plans that could be implemented within hours. But most significantly, the psychological landscape of the galaxy had shifted. The peace-loving species of the Federation had been forced to confront the reality that their civilized existence depended on others being willing to fight monsters in the darkness. When they arrived at Kepler-9, the scene that greeted them was unlike anything in Federation history. Over 200 vessels from dozens of species hung in formation around the system's primary star. Human warships worked alongside Korthak battlecruisers, Melani science vessels provided psychic coordination, and Vorthan technical ships supplied real-time analysis of the mysterious readings. "Captain Kethvar?" A familiar voice came over the communication channel. It was Nixtal, the young Zephyrian cub whose innocent questions had pierced to the heart of humanity's nature during the first council session. Now older and serving as a junior communications officer aboard his guardian's ship, his voice carried a gravity that spoke to how quickly the galaxy's children had been forced to grow up. "Young Nixtal," Kethvar replied warmly, "I'm glad to see you're contributing to our defense efforts." "Captain," the young Zephyrian said, "Commander Chen has requested all civilian vessels maintain position in the outer system perimeter. She says the energy readings are intensifying." As if summoned by their conversation, new contacts appeared on the tactical displays throughout the fleet. But these weren't the clean energy signatures of conventional starships. These contacts pulsed with an organic rhythm that seemed to twist and writhe through space itself. "All vessels," Commander Chen's voice broadcast across every ship in the system, "we have confirmed void-borne contact. This is not a drill. All civilian craft initiate evacuation protocols immediately. Military vessels implement Pattern 7 defensive formation." What followed was a display of coordination that would have been impossible without months of integrated training. Federation ships moved with the fluid precision of human tactical doctrine, while human vessels provided the aggressive edge that peaceful species had never developed. The combined fleet arranged itself in a formation that maximized defensive firepower while protecting evacuation routes. The void-borne scouts that emerged from the darkness were exactly as horrible as human reports had suggested. Their ships seemed to be grown rather than built, twisting masses of organic matter that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. They moved through space with an unnatural grace that suggested intelligence but no comprehension of mercy or negotiation. "Federation fleet," an alien voice spoke across all communication channels, but it wasn't coming from any ship. The voice seemed to emerge from space itself, carrying harmonics that made every listener's skin crawl. "You harbor the humans, you will be consumed for this transgression." Admiral Vorthak's response was immediate and definitive. "All ships weapons free, show them what the Federation has learned." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Voidborn scouts moved with predatory efficiency, their organic weapons firing streams of energy that seemed to devour light itself. But they faced an enemy they had never encountered before. A peaceful alliance that had learned to fight with the desperate skill of species facing extinction. Human ships darted through the voidborn formation like surgical instruments, their precise targeting systems finding weak points in alien biology. Korthak battlecruisers anchored the formation with their massive firepower, while Melani vessels provided psychic coordination that allowed the diverse fleet to function as a single, deadly organism. But it was the smaller ships, vessels like Kethvar's retrofitted cargo hauler, that proved most crucial. The early warning sensors and defensive systems provided by human technology allowed civilian craft to detect and evade voidborn weapons, while their crews served as forward observers for the military vessels. "Captain," Yilks called out as his sensors detected something new. "The voidborn are launching something, small craft heading directly for the evacuation routes." Through his enhanced sensors, Kethvar could see the horror unfolding. The voidborn weren't just trying to destroy the Federation fleet. They were actively hunting the civilian ships, trying to reach the living beings aboard to feed their incomprehensible hunger. It was then that Kethvar witnessed something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. A single human fighter, barely larger than a shuttle, placed itself directly in the path of a dozen voidborn assault craft. The pilot's voice came across the emergency channel, calm and professional despite facing impossible odds. "This is Lieutenant Maria Santos of the Earth Defense Force. All civilian vessels continue evacuation procedures. I'll buy you time." What followed was 3 minutes of the most extraordinary flying Kethvar had ever seen. The human pilot danced through space like a force of nature, using her tiny craft's maneuverability to lead the voidborn away from the evacuation ships. She couldn't destroy them all, but she could delay them, confuse them, make them focus on her instead of the defenseless civilians. When her ship finally fell to overwhelming firepower, she had bought enough time for every civilian vessel to reach safety. "Federation fleet," Commander Chen's voice cut through the chaos of battle, carrying the cold fury of someone who had lost too many friends to these monsters. "This is for Lieutenant Santos. All ships, Pattern Alpha, show them what humans learned about total war." The combined Federation fleet fell on the remaining voidborn scouts with a coordination and viciousness that surprised even the humans. Peaceful species that had never fired shots in anger unleashed devastating barrages, while military vessels from a dozen cultures worked together with surgical precision. Within an hour, the voidborn scouts were destroyed, their organic ships reduced to drifting biomass that would be carefully collected and studied. But the victory felt hollow. Everyone knew that scouts meant a larger force was coming. In the aftermath, as the fleet regrouped and prepared for the larger conflict ahead, young Nixtal's voice came over the communication channel again. But now he wasn't speaking as a communications officer. He was speaking as a child trying to understand a universe that had suddenly become much darker. "Commander Chen," he said quietly, "that pilot, Lieutenant Santos, she died to save us. Why would a human do that for species she'd never met?" Commander Chen's response carried the weight of everything her species had learned about sacrifice and duty. "Nixtal," she said gently, "because that's what people do when they care about something bigger than themselves." Lieutenant Santos understood that every life in this galaxy is worth protecting, whether human, Zephyrian, Korthak, or any other species. "But she was so small," the young cub continued. "Just one person against so many enemies. How could she make such a difference?" "Young one," Admiral Vorthak's massive voice joined the conversation, "size doesn't determine courage. Lieutenant Santos proved that one person, fighting for the right reasons, can change the course of history." As the fleet prepared to return to Federation space with news of confirmed voidborn activity, Captain Kethvar found himself thinking about the question that had started everything. Is that a human? Now he understood that the question itself had been wrong. It wasn't about whether someone was human. It was about whether they were willing to stand between the darkness and the light, regardless of personal cost. The humans had taught the galaxy many things: tactical doctrine, defensive technology, strategic thinking. But most importantly, they had taught the Federation that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those who appear smallest, that the most effective hunters are those who hunt not for personal gain, but to protect others. As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Kepler 9 system behind, every being in the fleet carried with them the knowledge that the real war was just beginning. The Voidborn would return in greater numbers, with larger ships and more terrible weapons. But they would face a galaxy that was no longer naive about the darkness between stars. They would face species that had learned to fight not just for survival, but for the right of all intelligent life to exist. They would face the Federation, guided by human tactical doctrine, but united by something much more powerful, the understanding that civilization itself was worth any sacrifice. And somewhere in the vast darkness ahead, Lieutenant Maria Santos had shown them all what that sacrifice truly meant. The hunters had found their purpose, and the galaxy would never be the same.